Is this thing on? How does this work? I haven't made a YouTube video in forever, but what better way to be resurrected for the old YouTube channel than to give you my way too early Oscars predictions? The first round. Let's do it. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the garage. Gerald here with you, of course. I was looking on my page, with the exception of the podcast that I do weekly with my partner Nick. I have not recorded a YouTube video of any kind since May of this year when I did the Deadpool and Wolverine trailer reaction. That's how long it's been. And it's time for me to give you my Oscar predictions for the 2025 Academy Awards. But I did cheat a little bit because the Venice Film Festival, of course, just happened. The TIFF Festival is going on as we speak. There's a lot of buzz coming out about these movies that are festival players, and all the fall festivals are going to follow. New York is coming up, etc. So we have a little more insight as to what movies might have the bait necessary to get the Academy's attention this year. I went through, made some slight tweaks. I'm going to give you my initial early predictions. I will try to release this video once a month leading up to the Academy Awards, when, of course, the nominations will be announced in January. The broadcast will be in early March this year. For the purposes of this video, my very first one, I'm only going to do the top of the line predictions, the 6 major categories for acting, of course, picture and directing. Let's get into my predictions. This will change, and I want to tell you guys this is all for fun. Nobody knows what the hell they're talking about until maybe early 2025, and sometimes even then we don't know. It does become a little more in focus by the early part of the year, and we get through the holiday season and award season, the fall festivals, but we don't know. And what's even funnier about these predictions is I was looking at them. Only 2 of the films that I'm going to mention, whether it's performances, films, whatever, only 2 of them I've actually seen. I have not had the opportunity to attend a lot of film festivals, so that's kind of funny to me, and it's hard for me to really talk with a lot of passion about these movies because I just haven't seen them. Let's start with Best Picture. Here's what I got for Best Picture, and also, as you can see, I do a legend that I put at the bottom of the screen here for you. Like I said, I started this initially back in late July, early August. It was just personally for me. It was a spreadsheet that I kept with movies that I think would possibly get nominated in various categories. I haven't dove into the below the line categories yet. I will do that as I see the films. Like I said, I just haven't seen virtually any of these yet, as they've not been released wide or in my city as of yet. As we're looking at Best Picture here, I want to point out, and you see the legend at the bottom of the screen, the purple star indicates that that's what I'm currently saying is going to win Best Picture. This will change. I will say with these predictions, there is absolutely no locks in my mind at this point, mid-September. There's nobody that I'm thinking that's a definite win, that's a definite nomination. I mean, really, there is nobody, because I haven't seen these films. The folks that have seen these films, a lot of them that'll make these lists and these predictions tonight, have gotten really good acclaim for the most part, and I'm very excited to see a lot of them, but I just don't know yet. So this is really like throwing a guess at the wall and seeing if it sticks. So my very, very first video is here on September 12th is when this is being recorded. These are my very first early predictions. Now, the difference why Anora is listed at the top here and Conclave is listed as the second, but is eligible, in my opinion, to win. Why isn't Conclave first if I think it's going to win? In my opinion, there are movies that are highly likely to get nominated, but are not winning films. I think the buzz around Anora, and Sean Baker specifically in his filmography, and how he really has not been recognized by the Academy, and he's this kind of indie auteur, I think it is highly likely, obviously the most likely in my opinion, that Anora will get nominated for Best Picture. I do not think, however, that it is a Best Picture winner. Now, you look at a movie like Coda a few years ago, but was during the pandemic, even Everything Everywhere All at Once a couple years ago. Those are indie films by even lesser-known filmmakers, and they still managed to win the Best Picture prize. So like I said, I could be way off, but I think Conclave is the second most likely to get nominated for Best Picture and will also be your Best Picture winner this year. That's what I'm saying as I'm sitting here on September 12th. Will that happen? Probably not. Let's be honest. Conclave is a movie that intrigues me, and people have seen it in the festivals. I've seen some buzz around it. Ray Fiennes puts in a performance. He'll come up a little bit later when we talk about my acting predictions. Also, Stanley Tucci's in this film. It's kind of a thriller, is what I've been told, like a dramatic thriller centered around replacing the Pope in Rome and kind of the political intrigue and the back dealings that happen behind closed doors. But what kind of freaks me out about that basis with Conclave is that I've also learned recently that it's rated PG, which I don't know how far they can go with the PG rating. Obviously, they didn't go too far at all if the MPAA is saying it's a PG movie, because then you could take your 10-year-old to see this. Not that they would enjoy a movie like that, but the subject matter, I would think, would be deeper thematically to require at least a PG-13 rating. And sometimes movies will get PG-13 or even R based on the subject matter and the themes in the film and how deep they are. So that worries me a little bit. It may be a kind of performance-heavy movie with some of those names I mentioned, but how's the movie going to play? As I'm sitting here, based on the trailer and the images that I've seen, as well as some of the feedback, I think this is the most Oscar-y movie in the bunch, in my opinion. We'll see if I think the same thing next month. Third would be Blitz for me. Blitz is a movie that I've had in my top 3 since I started this list in early August. I refuse to move it, even though I maybe should have, and I probably will at some point, but it's Steve McQueen, and you look at a movie like Widows, a tremendous film, one of my favorite films of that year, got nothing, got zilch. Shame. I mean, Steve McQueen is a filmmaker that I think the Academy respects his kind of longevity in movie making. And Blitz sounds like a film not only directed by Steve McQueen, but also a film that would appeal to their sensibilities. It's a wartime film. It has some big, big names in it. Most notably, maybe Saoirse Ronan, which we'll talk a little bit about here in a moment. I think Blitz, until something, let me put it this way, until something proves me otherwise, Blitz has been literally locked in at my 3rd spot, and I haven't moved it up or down since a month and a half ago when I started these predictions. Maria is a biopic based on Maria Callas, an opera singer, an Italian opera singer, portrayed by Angelina Jolie. This is Pablo Larraín, who did Spencer, which was my favorite film of that year. He also did Jackie with Natalie Portman. And this is kind of his trilogy about womanhood and being a woman and the spotlight on women. Now, with that being said, with the exception of a few nominations here and there, most notably from the acting, I mentioned Portman and, of course, Kristen Stewart for Spencer, which was my personal favorite performance of that year. I thought she should have won the Academy Award. If I was casting a vote, I would have voted for her that year. So, aside from performance, the Academy's not giving a lot of love to his films. That concerns me a bit, because you look at Jackie, you look at Spencer, no picture nomination. This is a period piece. Predominantly, I think it takes place in the 1970s, following a very well-known operatic performer and what she had to deal with in her personal life and her career and her voice giving out, and will she return to her love of opera? I think Angelina Jolie is going to carry this film on her back. I haven't seen the film. I know some people have, and they praise her performance. The performance from an actress like Jolie, who has been in the industry her whole life and has received nominations before, is going to blow people away in this movie. Now, with that being said, I am prone to this type of performance. The same thing happened for me with Kristen Stewart and Spencer. I was just drawn to it. I thought it was the best performance of that year, like I said, and I thought that she really did carry my love of that film. Her performance is what kind of made me fall in love with the movie as a whole, and I think a lot of the same attributes are going to be applied to Maria. That's why I think it is pretty high up in my list as to be nominated here. Amelia Perez dropped a little bit for me. This is a film that I saw kind of mixed things on coming out of some of the festivals. I had it a little bit higher. I dropped it down just this week in my predictions. It's still really high, and I think that it has a really good shot. I think Netflix is going to really put everything into this, much like they did Maestro last year. Maestro was a film that got a ton of nominations and walked away with nothing, if I recall correctly. And I think this is going to be a similar situation. I think Emilia Perez, along with not only Best Picture, possibly director, definitely some performances in the mix, definitely music is in the mix, editing, score. I mean, all that stuff is in the mix. So I fear that we have another Maestro on our hands for Netflix where it just, the accolades are rained down on it, but it comes up goldless and doesn't win anything. I could very easily see that happening, but for now, I still have it as a pretty shoe-in for nomination for Best Picture. One of the new entries into my top 10 for predictions that I just put in this week is Jason Reitman's Saturday Night. I've seen Dune Part 2, but of the 9 that I have not seen, I haven't seen 9 of 10 of these. Of the 9 that I have not seen, this is the one that I personally am most excited about because I've always been an SNL junkie. I love Saturday Night Live. I love a lot of the kind of staple actors that came out of the 70s and 80s from that show, like your Eddie Murphys, Chevy Chase, Dan Aykroyd, Bill Murray. Those guys are legendary. And then even going further into my high school and college career with, you know, Dennis Miller, Norm Macdonald, Chris Farley, David Spade, Adam Sandler, of course, and even up to recent memory with performers like Kristen Wiig and Jason Sudeikis. I love Saturday Night Live. The pedigree is amazing. So this movie is covering the first couple of hours leading up to the very first SNL and the very first live broadcast. And it's kind of like a real-time setting where it's happening. This is what happened the night of the first Saturday Night Live. And the anxiety around that, it has a very hip, young cast, most notably Rachel Sennott, who I am in love with. I love you, Rachel, if you're watching this. I'm thrilled to see this movie. Jason Reitman, of course, most notably, at least from the Academy perspective, they love Juno. This is a film that has a similar feel, but not as intimate as a movie like Juno, because there's obviously a ton of players on this stage at SNL at NBC Studios. Willem Dafoe is in this movie as looks kind of like as an unsavory villain type character, maybe a TV producer. So I'm thrilled that this movie is getting love coming out of TIFF, and I've heard some people say that it was the most fun they had at the festival, and it was the most like kind of got the most reaction from the crowd in a positive way. I think that the Oscars need to keep their recent trend of kind of hip, youthful films that bring in younger viewers, younger audience, and eventually probably younger voters to the Academy as well. I think Saturday Night is one of those that could do it. We'll get to director. I just don't know that Saturday Night is going to get a lot else, which is rare. In fact, it's almost impossible to get a Best Picture nomination without something. So I do think there's something there, but I need to see the movie first, possibly editing. I know there's a lot of long shots in this movie, so directing is on the table. And from what Reitman's done in the past, there's never been anything super like exemplary, you know, and maybe this is it for him. Maybe this is the film that the Academy goes, oh, okay, this guy can make a movie. Let's celebrate him. But I have Saturday Night in for Best Picture right now. Dune Part 2 and Sing Sing have dropped a little bit for me, just a couple spots. I'm going to keep them in my top 10. I think Sing Sing is very strong. And then I'll talk about Dune Part 2, which, like I said, is the only movie on this list that I've actually seen. Sing Sing, what are they doing? What is A24 doing with this rollout? I haven't seen it. And it's arguably been out for, I think, 2 weeks now, technically. It's playing in select cities or certain, like 100 theaters across the country. It's nowhere near me here where I live on the East Coast in North Carolina. What is going on? Now, a lot of people will say, and I've actually heard people say they're following that Past Lives formula, which, of course, got a Best Picture nomination and many other things at the Academy. And was also my favorite movie of that year as well. They're doing this staggered rollout, right? A deliberate rollout where you're hitting markets at different times. And you're not just saying, our release date is Friday, September, whatever. Here it is. But instead, you're releasing it in this portion of the country. A couple weeks later, you release it in this portion of the country. Then, and of course, it's already been in major cities. And then the next week, you release it down in Florida. And it's like a very strange rollout. And I think the reason I dropped it in my predictions is because I'm somewhat frustrated that I haven't had an opportunity to see this yet. It really bums me out. This is one of my most anticipated films of the year. I mentioned Past Lives. I think A24 is really, really good about handpicking these stories that have that beautiful kind of human element to them, to where we as a general audience can attach ourselves to characters that seem otherworldly to us. And this is a film that follows prison inmates who put on theater for their prison and for their cellmates and the other people there at the jail. And there's actual actors that were in this program in prison in the movie. We'll talk about Clarence Macklin here shortly. I think that's intriguing, much like Nomadland with Frances McDormand a few years ago, where there were actual nomads in that film that lived that life and then they kind of played themselves in the movie. That's going to happen in Sing Sing as well. Coleman Domingo been getting a lot of praise. We'll talk about his performance here in a second when we get to actor as well. I think Sing Sing's in for nomination. I just don't know what A24 is doing, and I hope they don't let this one slip through the cracks. That's my only kind of fear with this film. Dune Part 2, I gave a 10 out of 10 to. I never say, or I should say, I rarely say masterpiece. And since I started doing my podcast about 8 years ago, not a lot of masterpieces have come my way, what I would call masterpieces. I don't even know that I'm ready to say Dune Part 2 is a masterpiece, but what I will say is of the films I've seen this year so far, it is the most masterful of them. And when you're talking about technical stuff, forget it. I mean, we're looking at Oppenheimer levels of technical achievement with Dune Part 2. Anything you can think of, I would throw a nomination at. Score, cinematography, of course, visual effects, without a doubt. Direction, we'll talk about when I get to my director predictions. So many things you could put there for Dune Part 2 that I think the technical nominations are going to lift this film up to your picture nomination here and eventually your director nomination with Denis Villeneuve, and we'll talk about that as well. I think Dune Part 2 is slipping only because it came out so early in the year, March 1st. But Everything Everywhere All at Once, don't forget, also came out in March initially, and it wasn't the weird rollout that I was just talking about with Sing Sing. It just came out. And, it was re-released later when it got Oscar buzz and stuff like that. But it came out in March. It ended up winning Best Picture, and that was an indie film that looked like it had no Oscar legs to it, and it won Best Picture. So I think a movie like Dune Part 2, people are worried about it being in the middle because we're going to get Part 3. We had Part 1. Part 1 got what it got, which, phenomenal. But Dune Part 2 is better. It's a better movie. And the things in the movie, including the direction and including the movie-going experience, are just better. They're more enhanced. And we've come further. Denis has come further in his storytelling and his world creation with this film. And not only that, but the performances, Zendaya, Timothée Chalamet. I mean, this is a flawlessly executed sci-fi film that I think would be a shame if it didn't get a picture nomination. It's going to get the technical nominations, which I think is going to lead to the picture as well. And then to round out my top 10, I've had the movie Queer from Luca Guadagnino at my number 10. I like Challengers. Well, I can't say I like Challengers more because I haven't seen Queer. I know what Challengers is. I saw it. I loved it. It's in my top 10 movies of the year as we're sitting here right now. It's a very fast-paced, vibrant, kind of zany film. Love triangle, thriller, sexy, whatever. Is it Academy material? I don't think so. So, Luca Guadagnino also is releasing Queer this year, which is a much more dramatic character portrait. Daniel Craig is in the film as a well-known actor playing a gay man, and it's about a gay relationship a la Call Me By Your Name, which is one of my favorite films of last decade. Luca did not get a directing nomination for Call Me By Your Name. First of all, WTF. I mean, I don't know how that did not happen. But you have Challengers that came out this year that was well received. I think Queer is going to be well received and be much different in terms of like thematically how it feels. It's going to feel like a much more intimate, personal film than Challengers did. So because of his achievements in one calendar year, if Queer turns out to be another Call Me by Your Name type movie, what a feat. I mean, one of the most thrilling, edge of your seat, I don't even know what to call it, love story. I don't even know what to call it. Challengers, obviously the sports and tennis aspect as well. Just a thrilling movie, fastly edited, manically paced. The score from Reznor Ross is, I listen to it to this day. And then you have this, I'm assuming, tonal difference where it's Daniel Craig and his gay lover and a very sweet, dramatic kind of Call Me by Your Name-esque film. And the direction that he's put in this year, I think, earns him, when we get there, a Best Director nomination, but also a Best Picture nomination for the movie that's the most Academy friendly, which in this case would be Queer. I'm extremely excited to see it. All right, moving on. A lot of these movies I've mentioned when I did Best Picture. So if it's a movie that we haven't talked about yet, I'll talk a little bit about it. But otherwise, I'm just going to kind of go through these performances. I haven't seen a lot of these. So these are guesses based on what I've heard and, frankly, what I'm hopeful of. Looking at Best Actress, I think Angelina Jolie will win for Maria Callas. That's what I'm predicting here in mid-September. Could that happen? Yes. Could she be snubbed? Yes. We literally have no idea, especially when it comes to performances. Like I mentioned, I think Pablo Larraín is known for getting nominations for his actors. Okay? Kristen Stewart, who is, I'm a K-Stu apologist. I freaking love her, and I always have, even from Twilight, guys. She got nominated. This is a goth, indie, kind of against the grain actress that's not kissing ass and not following around seeking nominations and stuff. She got nominated for that performance. Natalie Portman is much more Academy friendly, if you will. She got nominated as well. My point is, no matter who is playing Maria Callas, because it's being directed by Larraín, it's immediately like, oh, we need to keep our eye on this. And then on top of that, you add Angelina Jolie, who's an actress that has that name, has that credibility. And I just see it. Again, next month, she might not even be in my top 5. But as I'm saying, I just see it. I just see them calling her name. I see her on the stage. I just see it, and if Brad Pitt's there in the audience, maybe we'll get some tea too. I don't know. But right now, Angelina Jolie is my number 1 to be nominated and to win. I just added this week Carla Sofia Gasson for Emilia Perez, a movie I was just talking about a minute ago. Netflix is going to really push this thing. I think from a performance perspective, I haven't seen a whole lot of it, but I know that it's a very performance-heavy film. Other actresses involved as well that we'll talk a little bit about shortly, Selena Gomez and others. I can see it happening. I just added her to my predictions. I think the diversity of the nominations is important too, and to get her in there is a big deal. I need to see more about it before I can confidently talk about it. But right now, I did add her to my top 5 from Emilia Perez, a movie that once I see it, knowing what the Academy has done in the past with similar type movies, then I'll be able to go, okay, yeah, this is a performance going to jump all over. Similarly, let me skip Mikey Madison for a second. Similarly, Cynthia Erivo for Wicked Part 1. I have in there right now, and she hasn't moved. She's been in my top 5 along with Mikey Madison. I think if there's an actress on this list that's going to drop out of my top 5 sooner than anyone else, it would probably be Cynthia Erivo. Not because I don't love her or because I don't think she's deserving. I'm just worried about Wicked. First of all, I'm worried about it being a part 1. I'm also worried about it possibly being too long. I'm worried about it being a well-known Broadway IP that's crossing over to the big screen. How's that going to translate to Academy voters that maybe aren't into Broadway or whatever? It's all abstract feelings, but I just don't know. I think if I mix it up, and if I get like Lady Gaga in my top 5, for example, I think Cynthia Erivo is going to be the one to miss out there on my early predictions. Right now, I have her in my top 5. Mikey Madison has not moved from the moment. This is a couple months ago, but there was like a test screening or something like that, and somebody I follow on Twitter, I don't even remember who it was, I apologize, mentioned Mikey Madison and Honora and how she's going to get her flowers for this role. And now everybody's saying it. You're seeing it at TIFF and etc. At the time, to me, Mikey Madison was Amber from Scream 5. And spoilers for Scream 5, one of my favorite Ghostface reveals, one of the most kind of impactful murders in the Scream franchise, come at Mikey Madison's hands in this film with Dewey. Those of you that are Scream fans will know what I mean. That was my girl, man. That's one of my Ghostface, and I just saw that tweet and I thought, and I honestly, I don't even remember ever really hearing much about Honora prior to that. It was just a random tweet 2 or 3 months ago. And I love Mikey Madison so much, I was like, oh my God, what if this is a real thing? And I started kind of reading about Honora, Sean Baker, who I love his films, historically speaking, and he just hasn't gotten a lot of celebration from the Academy. And I thought, yeah, let's fucking do it. And when I did this initially, about a month or two ago, I put her in there in my top 5. She was at number 3, which is where she still is. I'm not going to move her. I'm not going to move her. I love her. I love when young actresses kind of come out of nowhere and really surprise the world, both general audiences like us and critics and the Academy. And I absolutely adore it. And she reminds me of when Jennifer Lawrence started out. And Jennifer Lawrence did horror, and she did Hunger Games, and she did this non-Academy stuff to really build her resume and build her career. But she did get recognition for her acting and for her Academy-friendly stuff. Mikey Madison, I think, could follow a very similar path to somebody like Jennifer Lawrence, and I really hope so, and I'm leaving her in my top 5 here. Amy Adams for Night Bitch is an interesting one. I'm leaving her in my top 5. I had her higher. I had her all the way up at my number 1. I had her as my number 1, I believe, when I initially filled this out. Now she's my 5. I refuse to drop her out of the top 5. A lot of people dropped her out. They dropped the movie out after they saw the trailer. It's a very out there film because it's about a woman dealing with the troubles of motherhood and raising young kids, and at the same time she's having this break in logic where she thinks she's becoming a dog. So it sounds like a really far-fetched, almost too comedic or silly film to really receive legitimate Oscar attention, but I think Amy Adams always will get that attention when she's in a film that even has the title and the word Oscar in the same paragraph. And I see her getting nominated and another nomination. Unfortunately, I see her possibly losing again because, of course, I have Jolie winning. But I'm not going to drop Amy Adams out of my predictions. Her snub for Arrival remains one of the biggest heartbreaks I've ever received as an Oscars fan. I think she gets in. And then real quick, 6 through 10, Danielle Deadwyler for The Piano Lesson, which is an August play that's being adapted into a film. I think Samuel L. Jackson probably has a better likelihood of receiving a nomination and possibly even a win than Deadwyler does. But I also think one of the biggest goofs and bonehead moves of all time was when Deadwyler did not get nominated for Till in the same year that they decided to nominate Andrea Riseborough for To Leslie. No offense to Riseborough, but Deadwyler turned in. I'm still affected by it, her performance in Till, and it was a shame that didn't receive more notoriety that year and definitely didn't receive anything from the Academy. So maybe they make up for it here. I don't know. I'm excited to see The Piano Lesson for her performance for sure. Lady Gaga, I don't know. This is weird. If Gaga was in supporting, she's in my top 5. Hell, she might win if she was in supporting actress. We'll get there in a second. If she's in lead actress, as you can see, it's crowded. And we're only in September, guys. It's going to get even more crowded as the timeline goes on, chugging ahead to January. I could see Gaga or Deadwyler in that top 5, and like I said, somebody like a Revo may suffer. But I don't know. Is she supporting or is she lead? Somebody tell me in the comments, other pundits or other videos you may have watched. What is she? Who has seen Joker Folie à Deux? Is she in it equal parts with Joaquin, or are they going to campaign her as a supporting performance? I definitely know that they can do either after what happened with Gladstone last year and some others in recent memory. As of right now, I have her right outside the top 5 in lead actress. If she's in supporting, I think she has a much better chance of winning and of being in that final 5, but we'll have to see how that shakes out. Marianne Jean-Baptiste for Hard Truths is a movie that I barely knew anything about until a couple weeks ago. I added her to my predictions based on the reactions to her performance that I've seen thus far from people I respect in the Oscar and awards community. I don't know. I know, and I'm just sitting here being completely upfront and honest with you. I don't know anything about Hard Truths. I have not seen a trailer. I have not seen any stills. I haven't even read a synopsis. So I'm going on word of mouth here, and because, in my opinion, this category is a little light as of right now, definitely of films that are performances that I'm familiar with. The last two on this list that would round out my top 10 would be Nicole Kidman for Baby Girl and Demi Moore for The Substance. I think Demi Moore in The Substance, I've heard that it's a grotesque kind of body horror film. As much as it pains me, as you can see behind me, the Academy does not like horror, and they are extremely prejudiced when it comes to giving horror some awards. For that reason, I don't feel great about it. I did have her slip down even further when I found out the substance of The Substance. Nicole Kidman for Baby Girl is interesting. I think that this is going to be a sexual, dramatic thriller with her and what's his name, Harris something. The dude from Iron Claw. I love him. I just can't think of his name for some reason. And they have a May December romance, no pun intended. And Nicole Kidman gets to do her thing, a la Eyes Wide Shut. She's a decorated performer and actress. Hollywood loves her. She loves Hollywood. She's always there, always clapping for her friends and colleagues in the industry. I think that it would make sense that she would get nominated for Best Actress. I just have her right outside the 5 right now. But if this is a high-profile top 5, look for somebody like Nicole Kidman or even Demi Moore to be in there. Well, as expected, this video is running too long. I'm going to try to speed it up a little bit. Going into lead actor, I think Ray Fiennes from Conclave, the PG rating scares me. I already told you guys that. Why is it rated PG? That is so strange to me, but also kind of makes me a little more intrigued to see it. I think because of how long he's been in Hollywood without a nomination, I think that this is going to happen for him. I would be shocked. This also, like I said at the top, could be a Best Picture winner, first of all. And I also think of everything that I have seen of the players so far this year, and I mentioned this earlier, Conclave is the most Oscar-y, baity looking film, in my opinion, whether it be the costumes, the setting, the actors involved, like Fiennes, etc. I think he's going to get nominated. I think Coleman Domingo is your winner for Sing Sing. I think he had a chance to win last year for Rustin, but Netflix didn't push it enough, frankly. Even though he was out there campaigning, they just didn't push it hard enough. His performance was mesmerizing in Rustin. I expect the same thing in Sing Sing. And like I said, he's going to be matched up with people in this prison system that were doing what he's portraying to be doing in the film. And I think it's going to speak to him, and that's going to come across in the performance. And I've heard nothing but literal amazement from his performance in this film. And I think going along with other performances that he's had in the last couple of years, even in TV with like Euphoria, I think that his acting overall is making people take notice. And I think the Academy is going to be writing his name in a lot this award season. We mentioned earlier Queer from Luca Guadagnino. Daniel Craig. I just added him to my predictions, but yes, I'm putting him in my top 5. What else can I say? I mean, Craig is an established actor who knows what he's doing, and he can turn into whatever he's portraying on screen. And I see it happening, and I see Luca bring these performances out in these people. You know, I'm thinking of Taylor Russell and Timothée Chalamet and Bones and All. I'm thinking of, obviously, Chalamet and Call Me By Your Name. I mean, the guy directs actors to give their best, and they often do. And I think Daniel Craig, I wouldn't be surprised people walking away from Queer using that term that gets used a lot, the best performance of his or her career. I think that's what they're going to say about Daniel Craig, and I think there might be something to that when you're thinking about the acting profession itself. Right now I have Sebastian Stan in for The Apprentice, where he plays Donald Trump. I'm not a Trump fan, but this is fascinating to me that it's being released like 3 weeks before the election this year. And whether you like him or not, Donald Trump is a staple of our society. And for Sebastian Stan to take on that kind of larger than life persona in the 80s, so it's a period piece, I'm fascinated by this project. I really am. And that's saying something because I'm not a Trump fan. I don't seek out, Trump material or whatever. But I'm literally fascinated by seeing Sebastian Stan turn into Donald Trump and tell that story. I also think just the high profile nature of it in an election year could lead to not a whole lot when it comes to the Academy, but it could lead to acting here for Stan and supporting as well when we get there in a moment. Right now, I have Stan in my top five, but much like a Revo in Best Actress, I could see Stan being the one to suffer here and getting swapped out as we get a little further in the season. But if nothing else, the intrigue is at a fever pitch right now for what he's going to be doing with the Donald Trump character in this film, The Apprentice. When I found out last year that Timothy Chalamet was going to be playing Bob Dylan in a James Mangold biopic, I said on my predictions for 2024 Academy Awards over a year ago, I'm going to go ahead and tell you I'm predicting that performance for my next year, 2025, and here I am doing it. Yes, I locked him in my top five. I haven't really moved him. He's been sitting right there at number five. I refuse to drop him out, but at the same time, until I see the movie or even, at least more than the trailer I've seen, I'm comfortable with five. I don't think he's going to win. I'm comfortable with him getting another nomination here under James Mangold. Obviously, they love Walk the Line. Even Ford versus Ferrari movie performances. James Mangold, the Academy flocks to his stuff. Chalamet is an up-and-comer that astounds me every time I see him on camera. I think he's going to do it again here as a very well-known rock and roll musician, Bob Dylan. So Chalamet would meet him by number five. A lot of stuff going on in the rest of this category. I dropped Joaquin Phoenix out when the whole controversy came out about a month ago with him dropping out of the Todd Haynes project. People were out of work as a result of it. He still hasn't given an explanation for it. They even asked him in Venice, like, hey, dude, what happened? And he's like, you know what? I'm not going to talk about it. So I don't know. I love Joaquin. He's a good actor. But I just feel like his kind of appeal with the general audiences is kind of slipping, and I feel like he's becoming a little detached from us. And not to make bones about that we're attached to celebrities or anything, but he just doesn't seem like the kind of everyday hero that we would pull for prior to, I don't know, maybe a year ago. Maybe the first Joker, maybe ever kind of since then. He got his Academy Award already for Joker. I don't see them giving him another one for the same character. I just don't. The movie might be interesting. It might get some text. Probably Lady Gaga for an original song is probably a freaking shoe-in for a win, honestly. They haven't announced that yet. But I just don't, I mean, we've done this. We've done this. I know it's going to be a jukebox musical. I know Lady Gaga is a force of music and of acting as of late. House of Gucci aside. Nonetheless, I just don't see Joaquin being the spotlight of this film, especially given what's going on in Hollywood lately with Todd Haynes and everything else. So he fell out of my top five in the last couple of weeks. I've heard just crazy good things about Adrian Brody in The Brutalist, a film that I found out shot in 70 millimeter and that it's over 3 hours long. We're talking like Christopher Nolan level stuff. I don't have Brutalist in picture yet, but you didn't see it there, but it's probably like my 11 or 12, and it could creep into the 10. I do think Adrian Brody, as we're sitting here, probably has the best chance of a nomination for Best Actor. I put Paul Mescal for Gladiator 2. You know, I mean, it's Ridley Scott. I love the dude. I mean, every movie he makes, I'm entertained. Is this a Gladiator Ridley Scott, or is this the Napoleon Ridley Scott? We don't know yet. Speaking of Joaquin, he gave a performance that was Oscar-worthy in Napoleon. I think Paul Mescal will do 2 in Gladiator 2. He's dropping in my predictions, and I think eventually, you know, when the movie comes out and I see it, the hype might come back to me. But I think it's going to be more of this action spectacle versus a performance admiration that we have for somebody like Joaquin in the first one. You know, I mean, first Gladiator. I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of not really sold on it from a performance aspect yet, unless maybe you're talking about Denzel Washington chewing camera. We'll get there in a second. Nickel Boys, I just recently learned about this movie, and I recently found out that it's about a group of friends, young boys, that are abused, and they're kind of coming together to get through that by whatever means happens in the film, happens in the script. I don't know yet, but that intrigues me. That's a movie that, you know, has that kind of sleepers, you know, style to it. And these are a lot of young actors that are not super well known yet. And I've heard Ethan Harasy's name come up in Nickel Boys as the lead in that film. And kind of like what happened last year in The Holdovers with Dominic Sessa, an actor who just kind of comes out of nowhere and just blows everybody away. Not only for the performance, but the fact that he just didn't have that training and he's still able to catch your eye like that. That could be Harasy's kind of forte in Nickel Boys too. We'll have to wait and see, but I do love what I've heard about that film so far. Guys, that was weird. I'm sorry. I'm going to take it out, but somebody was banging on my garage door. I think I said all I needed to say for lead actor. Let's go to the next category. There was nobody there when I went to check. This is so weird. All right, as we're looking at supporting actress, as you can see, Zoe Saldana has been getting rave reviews for Emilia Perez. There's some other actresses in there as well that are in supporting roles. But Zoe Saldana is an actress from like Avatar, obviously. She's one of those that is extremely well known, but for some reason has never gotten her flowers with the Academy. I think based on what I've heard and a lot of people that I respect, if Emilia Perez is going to get something, as in take home a statue, she has the best chance. I also think she probably has the highest likelihood to get nominated as we're sitting here right now. I'm giving the award to, as you can see with the purple star there, Saoirse Ronan for Blitz. Much like I just said with Emilia Perez, I think Ronan is probably Blitz's best chance of winning something. I also don't really know if this is a supporting role for Saoirse or a lead role. I'm going with supporting because it seems to be that's what everyone else has been going with so far. We'll see how that turns out as well. If she's in the running, also having the Outrun this year, which seems to have kind of gotten lost in the shuffle when awards conversation is happening. I know some people still have her in their lead actress predictions for the Outrun, playing a recovering addict, I think. So probably a very juicy role for her performance-wise. But I just need to be sold a little bit more on the Outrun. Whereas a Steve McQueen wartime film like Blitz has all the glamour that it needs to get her a nomination, and ultimately what I think will be a win. Of course, this could change, but as we're sitting here right now, you can see I put in Ellis Taylor for Nickel Boys. That I just added her. That's on a hunch as well. I don't really know a whole lot about the performance. I don't know a whole lot about Nickel Boys aside from just the synopsis that I told you earlier. It does sound very Oscar-y, and I do think that she's an actress that is up and coming, that is bound to be recognized sooner than later. If her performance is as good and as powerful and memorable as what I've heard from a supporting standpoint, I think she stands a good chance of being in the final five to get nominated. Isabella Rossellini is an interesting one for Conclave. In fact, whenever Conclave comes up on this video, it's interesting. I'm kind of confused what to do with that movie because visually, like I said earlier, it looks the most Oscar-y to me. But it's rated PG, and I've heard of like a dynamic twist at the end of the movie that's going to split audiences. Half of the audience will be enraged, and half of the audience will think it was a great big swing that was worth taking. Where's the Academy going to fall? Is the Academy going to also be split like that? And then Isabella Rossellini, I'm leaving her here at number 4, which is where I've had her really the whole time since I started these predictions on my spreadsheet. A veteran actress, a well-known member of the Academy, a well-known name that has been in Hollywood forever. Some would consider like an international Hollywood starlet. But I've heard that her role is a lot more minimal than originally expected. So perhaps she's not going to be in the movie enough to really have that oomph to put her into the nominations. As of right now, I'm leaving her really on name alone, Isabella Rossellini. Natasha Lyonne and his 3 daughters has dropped a little bit for me. This is a film that I'm very excited to see, another Netflix property. I just don't know how much they're going to put behind it with a movie like Emilia Perez that they're also going to be pushing. I just don't know. It depends on how serious they want to take her campaign and how much she gets out there as well. An actress that's also, of note as of late has gained a lot of notoriety for her acting chops. And I think that in his three daughters, from what I've heard, her performance is the standout. That would be my top five right now, with Saoirse Ronan winning supporting actress. Looking at the others to round out, I love Maria Bakalova. I always have. I loved her nomination that she got for the comedic turn that she took a couple years ago, and just to have her nominated in the comedy, I thought was fantastic, and the things that she went to and the dedication in that film. Here we have her playing Ivana Trump, Donald Trump's first wife, and The Apprentice. I've already told you I dropped her out of my top five. I initially had her in the top five before I added Ellis Taylor. I kind of swapped them out. I would love her to get her second nomination here for The Apprentice. This is another one, almost every single movie that I'm talking about, that I just have to see what we're dealing with. I have to see what the reception is. I have to see what it looks like. Is it Oscar-y? Does it have that kind of Oscars lens to it? The Apprentice, I mean. I mentioned it before, I'm just fascinated by it. I'm just fascinated by this kind of study of the Trumps in the 80s. I'm not a fan of his. I'm just fascinated by taking on this character that is at the center of our pop culture right now and our political spectrum. It's just amazing to me. We'll see what Maria Bakalova does with that role. Felicity Jones for The Brutalist, and we talked about Adrian Brody as well. I think The Brutalist is a long film. In fact, I know it is. I've heard it's about 3.5 hours, shot in 70 millimeter. Very Oscar-friendly movie from what I've heard. So let's give notoriety to some of the performances. I know Felicity Jones has a pretty prominent supporting role in that film, and I've heard amazing things from quite a few people I respect in the community. Not having seen it yet, I'm going to leave her in my near misses, but we'll see as the season goes on if she gains or loses traction there. Selena Gomez has dropped a little bit for me just because Saldana seems to be the performance from a supporting standpoint in that movie. I think Selena Gomez is obviously going to edge out anybody when it comes to the singing aspects and their performance. So maybe we will see her on stage at the Academy Awards performing. Maybe there'll be an original song that'll be in the mix that Gomez is participating in. But from an acting standpoint, even though I love Selena, now you can have two from the same movie nominated. I get that. But in early predictions, I'm not going to do that. I feel like that would be foolish. I want to kind of be a little more right than wrong. So as of right now, I'm going to leave Zoe Saldana in the top five, and Selena Gomez is going to be a near miss for me, but still in the top 10. I just added Tilda Swinton from The Room Next Door, another film that I know virtually nothing about, but I do know that Tilda Swinton is well respected. She's a powerhouse. I've heard her name kind of mentioned more often the last couple weeks. So we'll see if that turns out to be anything. I added her recently here in my predictions. And then rounding out my top 10, I'm not confident with anything below like 7 here, to be honest. But I have Kaylee Spaney from Civil War. I loved her tender, quiet approach to that character in this very unsettling, bombastic wartime film, modern wartime film. And I thought she was the performance in the film that really grounded it for me and kept me invested in the proceedings with our main core group, and also her turn as a character in this movie and the effect that war and covering it as a journalist has on someone, especially someone young like her that's kind of learning from her elders and up and coming and being a protege, and just a phenomenal performance. I don't think, unfortunately, that Civil War is really going to be in the Oscar discussion this year, but I've got her. She keeps dropping for me ever since the movie came out. Eventually, she'll be out of play here, but I mean, man, it would be phenomenal for her to get the love for that role. I've got her at number 10 right now as we're sitting here. And then just a couple more categories. Next up, we're going to be talking about supporting actor. Actor in a supporting role. Clarence Macklin from Sing Sing is the most likely to get nominated. Period, hands down. I think it's a lock. I haven't seen Sing Sing, but knowing what I know, I think it's a lock. I mentioned that he is basically reenacting his own life in this movie. He was in this performance troupe when he was in prison, and they performed Shakespearean plays and theater projects for other inmates there at the jail. He did that. He's mirroring his own life. He's essentially playing himself, which is a phenomenal concept to me. I couldn't imagine acting, period, but I couldn't imagine having to act as myself. I mean, being myself, sure, but it just seems like a feat. And I think that Hollywood is going to embrace him as a character. I think Coleman Domingo is also going to win Best Actor for Sing Sing. So I think it only makes sense that the performances are really going to be praised in this movie. And Clarence Macklin, what a feel good story that would be, where it's just an everyday guy, an ex con, frankly, that is able to redeem himself and he's able to be rehabilitated, not only back into society, but into something that he loved when he was in prison, acting, performing. And now he gets to do it on the largest stage in Hollywood and be recognized by celebrities like Coleman Domingo and others. It would just be a story that I feel like the Academy is not going to pass up. I mean, these other actors that are in Hollywood, they're going to have their chances. I mean, a lot of them on this list, with the exception of Samuel Jackson, are young, up and coming actors in my top five. So I think Clarence Macklin wins, and I think it's a no-brainer that he gets nominated. Kieran Culkin for A Real Pain is kind of shot up into my top five. I've heard that he's just bonkers, hilarious, and still brings that dramatic gravitas to A Real Pain, a film directed and starring Jesse Eisenberg. I haven't heard nearly as much about Eisenberg's performance as I have about Culkin's. I think he's an actor that has such range that in television and the Emmys have been recognizing him, but never really from the movie side of things. And I think this might be his coming out party as a film actor for A Real Pain. Conclave, you notice how whenever I have Conclave, it just has the no change legend symbol there next to it. I don't know what to do with this film. I need to see it. I need to see more reactions to it from people I respect in the community, from Academy voters, that kind of thing. I just don't know. It's so fascinating to me that it just looks like the #1 Oscar film when you watch the trailer and you see the stills. But then I just have so many reservations about it abstractly that I just don't know what to do. So I'm kind of leaving it where it is for now. And it'll go up or down as the weeks continue. Right now, I've got Stanley Tucci for supporting actor from Conclave. Samuel Jackson, I also kind of left him alone because I feel like Clarence Macklin is going to beat him out because of the story I talked about, his personal story. But Samuel Jackson also has a story. It's been so long, nearly 30 years since he got nominated for an Academy Award. And the guy is a pillar of that community. And especially like he's an African American, like it just is almost frustrating that the piano lesson in his performance, which is a role that he played on stage, by the way, now he's going to be translating that into a movie, also Netflix. Are they going to push him enough? Are they going to campaign him enough? Are people going to see his name and go, oh yeah, we got to give Sam Jackson something? I just think that story, that personal story of Clarence Macklin, is going to overshadow Jackson's kind of dramatic return to the Academy's sightline here. But man, I love him. I think that would be great. I don't really know what to do after Samuel Jackson. For my fifth spot right now, I still have Adam Pearson for A Different Man. That's also a very similar kind of arc to a narrative, if you will, to Clarence Macklin, where Adam Pearson is playing a version of himself in A Different Man. Also a movie starring Sebastian Stan, by the way. I'm giving Sebastian Stan a little more notoriety for The Apprentice, but also just because I'm kind of fascinated by that project. But right now I have Adam Pearson in there. So looking at my top five, 2 of the 5 are not traditional actors. They're people who kind of fell into these roles based on their real life or inspired by their real life. So I think that could be a story that the Academy plays on and has a pretty big impact. You know, the narrative outside of the films often have an impact, and I think that could be the case. But honestly, after Sam Jackson, I don't really know what I'm doing here. So I'll just run through them real quick. Denzel Washington, 8 in the Gladiator 2 trailer. He looks like he is having a freaking blast. He's going to be menacing. He's going to be funny. He's going to be alluring. He's going to be magnetic to the viewer. He always is. And whenever Denzel is in a high-profile movie, or really any movie, frankly, especially one directed by a titan like Ridley Scott, you've got to consider him in the conversation. I just don't know what Gladiator 2, what it's going to feel like. If it feels like the old school Ridley, then Denzel could be part of that wave. Right now, I've got him right outside the top 5. Jeremy Strong, another one who gets a lot of recognition from a television perspective. I feel like he could start getting some more notoriety for The Apprentice. I talked about it with Kieran Culkin earlier as well. I feel like these are actors that are kind of crossing over to do these dramatic film turns that could really pay off for them. We'll see. Drew Starkey, I dropped him a couple spots. He plays opposite Daniel Craig in Queer. That's another one that I need to see, but I've heard amazing things, and I think Daniel Craig is probably going to be the performance in that movie. But I also fear that a movie like Queer could be this year's All of Us Strangers, right? Last year. I thought that was easily one of the top 10 movies of the year last year, and it got zilch come Academy time. And not only that, it was a very Academy friendly movie with some pretty big names. I mean, Andrew Scott just blew me away in that film. Paul Mescal, who's up and coming, I mean, had just got nominated the year before for arguably a more indie film. I, I, I don't know. I'm just worried. And then Luca had challengers this year too, which is obviously the more kind of accessible film of his based on what I've heard about Queer. But Call Me by Your Name was extremely successful and celebrated in Hollywood. So I think Drew Starkey could ride that wave as well. Although I think performances, Daniel Craig has the name, and he's been waiting his turn with the Academy, so he might be the one that kind of takes it. And then my horror affinity kind of coming out here in the last two. I've got David Johnson, who I just added from Alien Romulus because I just saw it recently. Phenomenal performance. I will say that I'm not an idiot. The Academy does not recognize horror, period. They recognize horror once every 5 years, maybe. When I'm talking about from a film perspective or a performance perspective, and that might be generous. It just doesn't happen. These last two are considered horror performances. At least I assume they are because I haven't seen Nosferatu yet. But I've also got Willem Dafoe in there, another powerhouse that you can never count out. And David Johnson would just be one of those jaw on the floor moments on Oscar nominations morning. It's not going to happen. They're both horror movies. I just don't see it happening for either one of these guys. Probably more so for Dafoe because he did get nominated for a film called The Lighthouse from Robert Eggers, same director, and probably a very similar off the wall, bonkers, dedicated performance that we're going to get from Dafoe. So more likely for him, and I've seen him in other people's predictions. I have seen virtually no one mentioning David Johnson, which is a shame because this is one of those things where if you just base it on the performance, we were talking about outside narratives and race relations, people's backgrounds, political affiliate, like all that stuff does play into it. I'm not an idiot, especially in the age of social media. I realize that. But if you're just looking at the performance on film, David Johnson easily, in my opinion, gives one of the best supporting performances of the year in Alien Romulus. And I'm so sorry for the length of this video, guys, but we're into our last category before I come back later and update you, hopefully in October. These are my first early predictions. So let's run through director real quick. Denis Villeneuve for Dune Part 2, my #1 movie of the year as we're sitting here right here, although I haven't seen 95% of the movies I've been talking about in this video. But nonetheless, of the movies I've seen, Dune Part 2 is my #1. What else can I say? We've already talked about it. He is doing what Christopher Nolan did last year in Oppenheimer, just on an absolute spectacle level of like, if somebody was trying to explain going to the movies to somebody who had never heard of the concept, you would talk about movies like Oppenheimer, movies like Dune Part 2. This is why we go to the cinema, particularly like IMAX and just the spectacle of the big screen. This is why. I think Denis Villeneuve will win director. I think he will ride the wave of about 5 or 6, maybe even more technical awards in this film. There's a possibility for some acting nominations, but I think, and film, of course, which I mentioned earlier, but I think we're going to have a split here where we have a winner for movie that's not the same winner for director. And because of that, I'm sticking with Denis Villeneuve until I see some of these other projects and maybe the direction in them is just irrefutable. But right now, I don't see how anybody could direct a film on the grand scale that Denis did in this film. The sandworm scene alone, which is a 5-minute scene, I mean, if that was the movie, I mean, he should be nominated. It would be a short film, but whatever. Amazing direction. Sean Baker for Honora, moving him up in my predictions. I just can't bring myself for anybody to leapfrog Villeneuve right now, but Sean Baker and what I've heard from Honora and it winning the Palme d'Or. I mean, Honora is going to get a ton of nominations. I think it's most likely to get nominated for Best Picture, but I almost equally see Sean Baker getting his recognition finally from the director's chair for Honora. You know, they love his filmography. They've just never nominated him for some reason. Steve McQueen for Blitz. I kind of switched him with Sean Baker here. Still in my top five. I mean, I, Steve McQueen is one of those kind of directors in Hollywood that have the longevity, that get amazing performance from their actors, and that just understand the game. They understand the game of filmmaking. Yes, they are great at filmmaking, but they also understand the game. They know how to get it out there, get the word out there. I think Blitz is a movie that I've been hearing about and actually been including in my predictions for like 2 years, and it keeps getting delayed. And it's finally coming out this year, at least I hope so. If not, I'll have to put it in my predictions next year. But as of right now, I still have Steve McQueen in my final five for director. Greg Quidar for Sing Sing, I moved up. Edward Berger for Conclave, I moved up as well. Berger with All Quiet on the Western Front, a movie that came out late in the year. Netflix barely pushed it. It had a ton of success at the BAFTAs. I think Conclave is going to follow the same path. It's coming out a little later in the year. I feel like it's going to be huge with the BAFTAs, and it's going to translate over to some Academy nominations as well. Like I said with Conclave throughout this entire video, I just don't know what I'm dealing with. But I am confident with Edward Berger, DGA, I mentioned the BAFTAs, and eventually the Academy. I think that he will be in the final five as we're sitting here right now. And then after that, I do not know. Looking at the next five here, Coralie Fargot, I've heard for The Substance, we talked a little bit about it earlier. It's a body horror film in the vein of like Cronenberg. So they're not going to nominate it. I mean, maybe something like visual effects or screenplay, depending on how that turns out, because I haven't seen it. But I mean, they're not going to nominate a horror director. They're just not. I hate saying that because I wish they would. In fact, if the Academy's listening, let's do a best horror category or something so we can start recognizing these films, because you're not going to do it otherwise. Just face the facts. But I've heard The Substance is one that will stick with you forever, much like Possessor did from David Cronenberg, or I'm sorry, from Brendan Cronenberg a few years ago. But I mean, no matter how good the film is, how striking it is, I just don't see the Academy giving it enough love for her to creep in the top five, which saddens me because, as you can see from my 10, she's the only female on this list. And I think, I don't know. I mean, we'll see as we get into the season a little further, but what women directors are in the conversation this year? Unfortunately, there's not enough of them, in my opinion. Coralie is probably the most that I feel comfortable putting her in that top 10. Robert Eggers dropped down a little bit for Nosferatu. Again, it's going to be a horror movie. It's going to be a gothic horror. The thing about Eggers, though, is that I hate using the term elevated horror, but he almost invented it along with Ari Aster and Jordan Peele, perhaps, where they create these films that are horrific, but there's so much going on from like a human character study, like an elemental part of it, and the study of the human psyche and relationships and grief. And there's just so many layers to Eggers' films so far. And I think Nosferatu is going to be a horror remake at its core from the 1922 classic, but it's going to also be probably more so an homage to that film while turning itself into an Eggers picture. The direction may be enough where they go, wow, I mean, and frankly, they could have done that with any of his previous films as well. And of course, they didn't, because I've already talked about the horror prejudice that exists there. Guadagnino, I put in here. I just added these last three, actually. Guadagnino for Queer, but I think that might be more so a cumulative nomination for him putting out Queer and Challengers in the same year. What a year for directing for that dude. Amelia Perez is a film that I just heard a lot more people talking about after TIFF. A lot of people I follow added a lot of Amelia Perez categories to their predictions that had not been there previously, like in August. That swayed me enough to at least add it here, add the director here in my top 10. I'm not extremely confident until I see the film, but I am confident enough to say that it's probably in the top 10 to 12. Ron Howard is my final spot at number 10. A lot of people might roll their eyes at seeing that name on there, but I've heard Eden is a movie that brings Howard's kind of touch back. And it's probably because of the stellar female cast: Ana de Armas, Vanessa Kirby, Sydney Sweeney, a lot of names that are up and coming that are like A-list female Hollywood icons right now. And I think that having a established director like Ron Howard, and then having these breathtaking kind of views and these breathtaking performances as well, might all come together in a nice stew to get him a directing nomination, and kind of like bring one of the old school Hollywood directors back and have their name mentioned as a nomination. I don't think he has a chance to win, but I just added him to my possibles here as I'm rounding out my 10 there for Best Director. All right, that's it, guys. I'm sorry for the length of this video. Holy crap, I'm excited about the Academy Awards. This is my first of at least monthly updates for the early nominations, what I think is going to get nominated for the Academy Awards come next January. One thing I will say, you can go to my website anytime. It's just 2psonapod.com. The link is down below. And you can go there and actually have an Oscars prediction page where I do update them frequently based on the spreadsheet that I told you that I keep throughout the year. So you can check that out. And I'm also going to start using some apps to kind of like keep myself in check. My dude, my buddy, the Oscar expert, and brother bro, they have an app called the Awards Expert. Make sure you download that, by the way. Maybe I'll throw a link down there for that too. It's kind of like Gold Derby, but better in my opinion. And you can keep track of when you predicted Ron Howard. Did you predict him in September? Or you did, or you didn't predict him until January, or whatever. So it has a historical data for you as well to kind of track your own personal predictions if you want to do that. Thanks for tuning into this video. Make sure you hit up my website for frequent, probably weekly updates to these. And then I'll come back next month and do a video letting you know where I stand and how many of these names dropped off the list. Are you excited for the Academy Awards? Let me know what nomination I missed. Who's going to get nominated that I didn't mention on this video? Let me know down below. And thanks for watching. I can't, if you're still here this far into the video, I love you. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time in the garage.